Hello everybody, this is the Vikstrand. 9 years ago, Gangster Squad was released. It was a classic Hollywood movie about, gangsters and tough cops, and had an impressive cast and a very impressive budget and a really slick production to it. But it wasn't met with a lot of fanfare. I would say it was met with, I wouldn't say apathy, but it was met with and I don't know why that was. There was some obvious problems this movie quite couldn't clear, but for the most part I just think that this movie suffered from not being The Untouchables. If The Untouchables never existed, I think people would, look more favorably at this movie. But let's find out if that is the only reason this movie was kind of forgotten immediately after its release. This is Gangster Squad. Los Angeles, 1949, and the city is run by Mickey Cohen, played by Sean Penn. He has run off all his competition, killed all his rivals, he has cops in his pockets, he has judges in his pockets, and everybody just looks the other way whenever his men and stooges are doing something evil. And no one is really standing up to him. But there are a handful of rough around the edges cops. One, John O'Mara, played by war veteran Josh Brolin, who kind of fights back but doesn't really know how to, and doesn't really have the manpower to take him down. But the chief of police, played by Nick Nolte, gives him carte blanche to do something about it, form a small little squad of cops and then attack Mickey Cohen, but not as cops, as if they were gangsters themselves. So O'Mara forms this tight little unit, consisting of, among others, Michael Pena, Anthony Mackie, Giovanni Ribisi, Robert Patrick, and a little bit further down the line, also Ryan Gosling, who is a bit of a nihilistic police officer who kind of also falls in love with the etiquette teacher of Mickey Cohen, played by Emma Stone. We'll get to them later. Josh Brolin and Ryan Gosling, by the way, are army veterans, and they're taking on this task in the same way as if they would plan a war or something like that. I like that a little bit, even though it didn't come to play in the full extent that I would have hoped that they would have, but what are you gonna do? Gangster Squad's resemblance to The Untouchables really doesn't do this movie any favors whatsoever, because, quite frankly, everything that happens in The Untouchables was better than, what happened in Gangster Squad, except maybe for the fact that Josh Brolin is a far more compelling character and a far more interesting protagonist than Elliot Ness in The Untouchables. But beside that point, it is not as visually compelling, it's not as tense, it is not as interesting, it doesn't have the same flow, the pacing isn't as good, the characters are not as fascinating. There is something that is missing from this movie. I don't quite know what it is, but it feels like there is a big element of storytelling that is somehow missing from this movie that was existing in The Untouchables, that this movie really should have needed. But let's talk about the biggest problem this movie has. Sean Penn. Mickey Cohen himself, because Sean Penn just overacts himself into a neutrons in this movie. He also managed to be boring as well. I didn't know you could do that, but somehow Sean Penn found a way to do it. He's not a very interesting villain for the piece. He's no Robert De Niro in The Untouchables. Another problem this movie settled with is called Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling. I don't know why, but I have a hunch that Hollywood believes that just because Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone are really talented and are really gorgeous, they're supposed to have good chemistry together and they're supposed to fit in, whatever movie they're being, casted into. That is not the case. Because Ryan Gosling has to be casted into very specific types of roles for it to work. Blade Runner 2049, Drive, perfect. This one, not so much. Emma Stone feels also kind of miscasted in this one, but when they share screen time together, They have anti-chemistry on almost Twilight levels of, oh, I want you to go away now because you're terrible together. I don't know what it is, but they don't work together at all. You should either rewrite them or recast them, especially when it comes to Gosling, who does not need to be emotionally attached to anything. He needs to be a more cold and distant, person. That is when he shines the best. This movie also has a bit of a problem with its pacing because just comparing it to The Untouchables, it had an amazing pace. They crammed so much into that movie. There's always stuff happening. It feels like there's a lot of build-up and there is a lot of, rest periods, and there is a lot of, hills and valleys in, Gangster Squad that makes the movie feel a little bit stop-start-ish. And we're feeling like we're building up to something big. I like the ending of this movie, despite the fact it was not quite as epic as the filmmakers intended it to be. It also hurt the movie severely that it was marinated in cliches and had some rather bad editing to it. But despite that, I still think that this movie is, well, really, really entertaining in parts. I mean, the car chase is fucking amazing. There is a couple of big epic showdowns that is also pretty much awesome. And the acting is pretty good, except for Emma Stone, Sean Penn and Ryan Gosling. The rest of them is pretty damn good, especially Robert Patrick with this old gunslinger thingy. Because if you are into, tough guys who smokes fedoras and suspenders all around, this will be an all-out feast for you. And yes, this movie do have a lot of problems, but it is also equipped with a pretty nice atmosphere, and it has a good soundtrack, and it has a couple of really good actors in it doing a pretty good job, except for the aforementioned stinkers of the whole thing. And you do care about where this one is going, so it is not without its perks also. And the movie looks really good, and the movie is entertaining, and it also has a little bit of a connection with The Mask. What, you may ask? Well, when The Mask is, exiting the Cocobongo Club, and he's, surrounded by the cops, and he starts singing the ching-ching song that he's singing, it is the same that the woman sings in the club when the Gangster Squad is attacking it to, rob Mickey Cohen. I think that was kind of a little bit of a nice touch. One thing this movie kind of missed was the fact that Giovanni Ribisi says at some point that, are we really better than Mickey Cohen? They could have explored that thing better, and they decided, well, not to do that. But nevertheless, it was a fascinating little detail that could have been used better, but what you gonna do? In the end, I will say that Gangster Squad is a really, really well made, slick and good looking movie with some pretty good actors and, a pretty good story, but still something is missing, and I wish I knew what it was. Do I recommend this movie? Yes, I do. But you should be aware of that you should lower your expectations just a little bit in order to fully appreciate it, I would guess. And if you can take Sean Penn's overacting and the miscasting of Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling, you probably will get a lot out of this one. There's probably a lot of people who think that they're actually good. And you're right to be wrong, sir. Gangster Squad is well produced, mostly well acted movie with a fascinating history and a couple of really interesting characters. I give this movie 61 points. It is a good movie that could have been a great movie with some minor tweaks and turns to it. I also question the choice of director for this movie. Ruben Fleischer isn't exactly a man known for his handling of period dramas and gangster movies. His best movie is Zombieland, for Christ's sake. But I guess he did his best. So I'll see you next time from, well, so-and-so reviewing, well, such and such. Thank you for watching. Thank you very much.